All right, everybody, what's going on? So, just going to go over, right? Big news. We have the QBanksy Pro indicator that was finally released by Anthony today. We're going to go over some of the different settings just to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page, as well as, adding or really kind of going a little bit more in depth into some things that can be added as confluence or just essentially when it comes to like maybe a different trailing stop loss, right? Because as we know, when it comes to this center box here, when we're trailing our stop loss, we're trailing by 2 boxes, right? So you know obviously there isn't really much happening in here, but when everything flips green, or everything flips red, for example, let's say this is an entry, like we would be trailing each new box, we would be trailing our stop loss buy box, right? So we'll go over that. We'll go over the settings of the QBanksy, okay? So very first thing that I want to put out there, okay, that the way that the Q clouds are calculated, it's multiplied by 2 of whatever box size you want, right? So if I'm trading on 10B, right, and the two Q clouds that I want are 10B and 15, right? So like if you went into the Q cloud trend trader, right? So the old setup was, so this was the old setup here, right? You would want this, obviously nothing else matters because we're not automating, but this you would want as 10, and then the second one you would want as 15, right? If you're trading 10 bucks on the chart, okay? Let me fix my camera a little bit. Just point it down. There we go. If you're trading 10 on the chart, right? If you're trading 5B on the chart, then it was 5 for the first Q cloud setting and 10. Okay, so slightly different, like I said, when it comes to how they're calculated. So whatever you want to kind of show on the chart, you're going to double that. So if we're doing 10B, right, then the two, and you can just leave that unchecked, the two Q clouds that I want are 20 and 30, because 20 divided by 2 is 10, and then 30 divided by 2 is 15. So that will give me the same Q cloud levels as if I just had the two Q cloud trend traders like overlaid on top of each other, and one was 10 and one was 15. Okay. Another thing that I want to point out, of course, is, and we can get rid of this now. Another thing that I wanted to point out is the Q line. Okay, so these are the settings for the Q line. This is just, again, add extra confluence, right? If you want to take only the setups that happen right at the Q line or bouncing off the Q line, that's something that can be done, right? I know some people trade that way. Sometimes I take entries like that, right? Um, so for example, this would be here. This would be a good, oh, wrong one. Let's use this one instead. So this would be a good example, right? This is the second box that closes back below the Q cloud. We're essentially coming right off of the Q line. This is an entry. That's the move, right? Another one would be right here, maybe right here. If you want to maybe add a third box for a stop loss on that in that specific case scenario. Here's another one right here, right? So this is your entry. This is the second box that closes below here, right? This one may be a little bit too far. That's fine. Maybe not. You probably won't take that one if you're just looking for those Q line bounces. Nothing else here. And again, remember, everything still has to be all red or all green, right? Nothing here. This one didn't really pull back far enough. This one could be a good example where we're waiting for that second box. So this is the box, that's the entry, right? And that's the move. This one here could be close enough, because if you're taking your stop, your take prop, or your entry is here, then the third box would put you below the Q line. So I would max it out at 3, right? If the third box isn't clearly below the Q line from your entry based on these settings, then it might be too far, right? And again, this is if you're deciding to trail by the Q line, right? If you're trailing by the Q line, you're catching this entire move all the way to the top, right? Obviously, if you haven't traded or you should hit your take profit on this very easily, right? If this, let's say this is the first trade, but like for example, this one here would be another example where, and let me actually change this color if it lets me. This would be an example of going through that Q line with everything being green as well. So this is that second box closure. Your stop loss would be below here or below here, right? Essentially, we would want it below the second one. So the first box that's clearly closing below it, that would be our stop loss. Obviously, still by the tick, so nothing changes. The only difference is that now, rather than trailing with each new box closure, instead we're trailing by the Q line. So as the Q line, once the Q line flattens out, then we're moving our stop loss to the box where we have that full close below, right? Flattens out, moves up, flattens out, moves up, flattens out, moves up. So on this flattened area, we're in line with this box. In this flattened area, we're in line with this box, right? Or that level. So essentially in this case scenario, right, we're catching this entire move, right? We're not getting stopped out because we didn't get a closure, unless we got unlucky and we got a ghost fill, right? Here, that's the only way. But then you could have also honestly very much gone in that second time that I told you about earlier, right? So those are some examples of kind of taking the trades a little bit differently, right? Adding a little bit of confluence. Obviously, we still want to make sure that we're looking at both of our panels on the right side and the left side, just for important levels like pivot points, the Q line, the Q cloud, right? Similarly on both ends. You don't really want to be taking trades within. So like if we're looking on the left side, like in this area, or like if price isn't clearly above this Q cloud, these Q cloud lines and above this, right? Anything that's like within, so like all of this here, you would probably want to stay out of trades, right? Like continuously going back, right? We're all still green here, nothing really here. This is a possible entry where we get that second box closure outside. Everything is green. Your stop loss would be right here, right? And then if you're trailing by the Q line or catching this entire move, right? You're getting stopped out in profit somewhere around here if this doesn't hit PT. If this doesn't hit PT, then you're probably going for too much, or you're not leveraged, you know, equally to what it is that you're going for, right? In this case, oh wait, this was like yesterday. This was today, right? So like from today's trading day, all of this we would have stayed out of. This would have been that first trade of the day, so that should have most definitely hit your take profit. If this one doesn't hit, then we also have this one right here, right? So notice the difference between this one and here or here, right? We don't have a second candle close above it. Again, this doesn't take into account possible ghost fills, right? That's going to happen sometimes, right? I'm sorry to break it to you. Okay, that's the reason why we have a tick, maybe even two ticks, if you're using 10B, like past the level where we want to technically get filled at, and then that's essentially just to kind of give us the best chance to not get filled ghost fills, right? Where like the box doesn't print. But if price moves 30 points in one direction and then back in less than a second, then that's going to be an example of there's going to be a couple boxes that didn't print, right? So it's just how quickly price moves. You're not going to be able to really control any of that, right? So the difference between these two and this one right here is that this one had two clear boxes closed on the opposite end of that Q cloud, also with, or of the Q line, also with the Q cloud lining up, right? So if we take the Q line off, right? These are still entries. If anything, this is an entry here that probably gets stopped out at. This is an entry. This is an entry that gets stopped out at, right? So that's a big difference, right? Obviously, we would miss something like this, which would be just back-to-back wins. But with the Q line, we have essentially we're taking this entire trade here. Sorry, my dog was like yakking. Essentially, we're taking the entire trade here, right? So out of these two trades, we're taking this one. Again, if we're trailing by the Q line, we're taking this entire trade. Now, this is some of those instances where maybe it, may not be as great, and that's, that's fine. Let me see what time it is. It's about 14:30. This is somewhere around here, right? So up in this area right here, right? We are 205. Oh, this is from Friday. What am I doing? Okay, either way. So it's similar to, right, this is just showing the visuals. Obviously this data is compressed, so it's not accurate, but this is still, an example of like what they would look like essentially. Let me go back to where it's accurate. So, okay, so all of this right here, right? So very similarly, right? We're flipping red. This is the first box or first retest that we have of that level, of that Q line. Everything's red. This is our entry right here. Our stop loss is here, right? And we're essentially trailing until we get it full close. So we would have gone stopped for a small loss here, but it still went about 4 boxes, so 40 points, right? So again, it all depends on what your take profit is. If this is the first trade of the day, then you may have hit take profit. If not, that's fine because we have a second trade right after it with a similar stop loss, but this one goes all the way for about, oops, let me get rid of this. This one goes for about 110-point run up before you would have gone stopped out, more or less right here, right? Similarly, right here, same thing, right? Second box, right here. This is your stop loss. And then this one goes for about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 60 points, right? Another example right here. So these are accurate Renkos. So these we can actually go by. This is a trade right here with the stop loss at 3 boxes for a winning trade. Another one here. This is another one right here. This is where that second box closure, both below the Q line and where everything flips red. And then this one had a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 box run up. So 80 points before coming back. This is where you would have gone stopped out in profit, right? So it's securing less. So if this type of trailing stop loss, I would definitely implement more with, you know, a, a prop firm that doesn't have a trailing unrealized trailing stop loss. So like, top one futures, Tradeify, Top Step, where they have like end of day, that may be a little bit better for this type of stop loss. If you're trading Apex, right, with the evals and the trailing stop loss, you either want to be very under leveraged, right, or you want to trail, at the box. So there's a bunch of trades on the way down here that we could have taken. This is, for example, this is still a big winning trade, break even, loss, small win, break even, small win, break even, break even, small win, break even, small win, loss, small win, right? So these are all still good trades that you can still use. It's just more, you're just more actively, entering and exiting, right? But like nothing changes where we're still looking for all green or all red. And then now essentially what we're doing is we're making sure that we have, the Q line as an added confluence to where it's acting as support or resistance or dynamic support or resistance to the point where, a trade like this is our entry, right? This is the second box that closes back below above the Q cloud. We're also retesting or coming off of the Q line. Our stop loss would go here at this third box. And then we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 90-point run up before we would have gone stopped out in profit here. But if you take a trade and you get 90 points out of it and you don't hit your PT for the day, like what are we doing, right? So nothing changes in the entry model. I'm just showing you guys other possible. Um, I'm just showing you guys other possible criteria or ways to trail a stop loss depending on what type of um, account or prop firm you're using, right? Because I want to give you guys options. But what we're looking for confluences that we're adding, for example, here with the Q cloud and the Q line on the 2-minute chart, as well as the pivot point on that 15-minute chart. We also have previous month high and previous day high, which could act as support. So this entire area would be something to pay attention to, right? If we trade below that, I would want to see maybe a retest to the downside, okay? And then you just look for the entries on the center in the center chart. Okay, but nothing changes with the strategy. It's all the same. Now instead we're using QBanksy Pro, which just kind of puts everything together so we don't need a whole bunch of different strategies. And really, I mean, you don't really need Q Pro. Like this is what it would look like without the Q line, right? Or Q wave, I'm sorry, which I don't personally use. Okay, I don't know even know why I have it on there, honestly. Maybe it was for the momentums. Oh no, that shouldn't be there then. So this is essentially what it would look like, right? So like a possible entry would be this, maybe getting a red box print or a box printing bearish, and then taking our entry model here with our stops below. This would probably be a 3-box stop loss because that second box, notice how it's not clearly below the Q line. So if we close the box here, and then this is our entry, this is our stop loss right here, and then we just trail by the Q line. So once, the Q line starts moving up, essentially we would need, it starts to trail up at like 3 boxes past. So 1, 2, 3. That one closes, and the next one you start to see the Q line start to move. So about 30 points, which I think is more than enough, right? But again, if you want to just trail, you can. There's nothing against that, right? So red box print or bearish box print, and then we take the entry the same way we would any other trade, and then we just go from there, right? And that's basically all there is to it, right? There's not really much else. Um, Everything stays the same. The entry model, we're still looking for green on green. The Q cloud settings are the same. The added confluences are the same, right? The only thing that we're changing is just, or not even changing, just showing a different way to possibly trail a stop loss, right? And then, aside from that, we're just trying to make it as easy to use as possible, right? Because that's I think that's one of the biggest things about this strategy is that it's very easy to pick up on, right? Like people can pick up on it very, very quickly just because of how simple it is. Obviously, it will take a little bit of practice, and that's fine. But for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. Um, but yeah, that's going to be it for me. I mean, again, doesn't really get any simpler than that. If you guys have any questions about it, ask me in the Discord. I'm more than happy to help out and answer those questions, right? Um, and yeah, we'll go from there. Alrighty, guys. Alrighty, buddy. I hope you guys have a good rest of your night, and I will see you guys tomorrow. All right, peace out.